background's a little bright, but not too bad. You're really well lit, though, so I'm not going to argue.
Well lit, huh?
In fact, I'm going to actually warm you up a little bit. That's too much. That's nice. A little more color. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, trick is not to fall asleep. Yes?
Oh, yeah. One fix.
Yeah, go ahead. Got wind blown.
Yes. Okay. So we left off. Dave is born.
Mm-hmm.
You're a new father.
Mm-hmm.
You might repeat a little bit from last time. It's fine.
Yeah.
Take me through that experience, that first, few months of being a new dad, and what you're doing and how that's going.
Well, it was certainly an interesting experience. But the birth and all was timely. We had taken Mom down, and the doctor said, show up at the hospital. And we got there. Of course, it's typical. We wait and we wait and we wait, and it's late. So Dr. McElroy, also your obstetrician, said, look, he said, there's no talking to me. It's pointless you sticking around here. Nothing's going to happen. So, of course, I still had to be to work the next morning. So I said, okay, that's that. So I went home. Went to bed. My alarm clock always went off at 5 o'clock on the dot. 5 o'clock on the dot, my alarm clock goes off, the phone rings. David was born, so I quick grabbed the shower, grabbed some decent looking clothes, and took off for the hospital. I said, of course, now it's really, I'm out the door. I don't know how long of a ride it should have been. It was about a 10-minute ride the way I drive. So I get down there and I park someplace, walk in the front door, gentleman standing there. He says, good morning. I said, good morning. I had my tie and my sport jacket on. So I walk in, I forget what floor it was on, third floor, I believe. And I go up there and I get off the elevator, and I'm walking towards a gentleman sitting at the desk here, doctor. I had met Dr. McElroy, I assume it was he. So I'm walking towards him, meanwhile, a nurse stops me and says, can I help you? I said, yeah, I just got a call that my son was born. She said, was there anyone down in the lobby? I said, yeah, it was a very nice gentleman down there. I said, what did he say to you? I said, he said, good morning. At which point the doctor stood up and said, waved me on in. So that was my first meeting of your brother. But that was fun. Everything went well, and we got home before Christmas, and we, Mom went over to stay with Dad and Pop for a little while. But and pretty soon we were back home, and then comes this horrendous learning experience. Like, now what? Suppose he cries. What do we do? He was pretty placid, as he is today at 40, whatever. We won't discuss that. That was always his personality. He was very easy to get along. I remember our pediatrician, Mom called him one day and said, she said, the baby always sleeps. She said, is that normal? The doctor says, I don't understand you mothers. The baby cries too much. The baby eats too much. Baby sleeps too much. What do you want? He said, the baby sleeps, he's tired, let him sleep. So he was a nice guy. He was nice. And that was real easy in those days too, because the first visit, he came to the house. Now that's something I don't know whether you'd ever find anywhere unless you're out in I don't know where you'd find that service today. Real nice guy. And he was only maybe a block away at the most. So, and he was our pediatrician while we were there. And I don't know, the experiences went very smoothly. I mean, things went along. We learned things that didn't work, things that did work. Learned, of course, that early on of the playpen that we had, it was one of those soft-sided things. He could climb out of that very easily. He discovered quite early that if you stack things one atop the other, that it elevates you quickly. The coming down part was a little difficult. Going up, he learned. Coming down he had to learn. That was another learning experience for him. But yeah, he was able to get around. But he wasn't a walker. He didn't walk fast soon, early on. He was a great crawler. I love to crawl. But walking was something that came later. It was much the same as talking. He was also a very late talker. To which he replied at one point in his life when he was older, he said, well, at that age you have nothing to say. So, all right. But, nothing ever came of that. In fact, once he started talking, he started talking sentences.
So at this point, you have a toddler. It's 1966, 67.
Yeah.
You're working full time.
Yep.
You're going
Finally.
to school at night, and you're thinking of moving.
Yeah. We were. Was I still? Now let me think about that a second. Now, time flies by in a hurry here. Yeah, I was still working at the same job. Yes. Okay. Right. Yeah. We had contemplated moving because it didn't. The neighborhood started to change. The funny side story to that. There was a couple, I think, next to us. Anyway, we got into a conversation with one of the neighbors one night, and they said, "Gee, did you see the fuss at the house up the street, which is only on the other side of the street, a couple doors up?" I said, "Nah, our bedroom was in the back. I was sound asleep out here, I think." "Oh, yes, the police showed up." I said, "Oh my goodness, what, was it something?" "Oh, no." He said, "It's a red lighthouse." She said, "There's all kinds." I said, "Say what?" "Yeah." "Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know." Jeez, meters. Okay, well, there you go. The neighborhood's. So the neighborhood did change dramatically. It was a lot of shifting in and out, and the elderly people that were there either moved out or or had died off or whatever. So it was time to move out. The house was the apartment was gigantic. It was a big old 3-story house in West Philadelphia, and we had the entire first floor and the entire basement because we had the only access to the basement. So it was easy, it accommodated everything you wanted to do. We had a dining room that was easily half again as large as the one we have now, with 9-foot ceilings. So, yeah, we had a couple New Year's Eve parties there. It was, it was great. There was nothing in the dining room, obviously, except a rug. We did buy that dining room set while we were still living there, however.
Where is this address?
1258 South 58th Street. I believe that was the address. 1200, I know, 58, I'm pretty sure.
So why Penguin? Why?
Well, that was interesting. We started to look. That was a long look. A couple of things we decided is we wanted a good school district. So we looked around and talked with Mom at that time. I say had been into teaching, so knew a lot of people in that field. And we looked around. We looked around up in the Abington area, Glenside area, because they had good school districts up there. And we got very skilled at this. Now, of course, we were on a limited budget, which I say that because I don't mean to criticize the real estate guy. A very nice elderly gentleman. But as soon as the car turned the street, looked down the street, we could immediately spot the house he was taking us to. No sign, because it was the worst looking house on the block, is what I'm saying. So we went through that for, weekend after weekend after weekend. It was unbelievable. I can't tell you how many houses we saw. And none of them particularly, it wasn't like, gee, we'll think about that one. Then we did take a ride out and ad in the paper for new homes being built in the Norristown area, East Norriton. Beautiful big twins, huge places. Much bigger than the house that we moved to in Penguin. Nice value, good for the buck. At that time, your Uncle Bob was married to Kathy, his first wife. Now, she was still teaching at that time. And we were talking to them one night, and she said, "Oh, no, no." She said, "No, unless you're going to private school." I said, "No, we really want a good public school district." "Oh, no," she said, that's the Norristown school district. "You do not, no, I don't care what they're charging." She says, "No." So taking her word at it and learning, of course, that she was extremely accurate. In fact, I believe it was she and Bob, I'm not sure which, had probably a copy of the local paper. And they called us up one day and said, "Hey, there's a house not far from where my parents live. It's a twin. It's nicely priced. It's a nice area." And, of course, that was the house on Broderick Lane. So we went there in the evening, because again, I was working, and looked at the place, and an elderly woman and her son, who was, I would say, in his late 40s, early 50s, single, lived in the house. Well, there was zip done to the house. I mean, it was not mechanically beat up, but, you know, and Mom tells the story too, literally the wallpaper was held up with Band-Aids, where it was falling off the walls. But mechanically, it was in good shape. I mean, kind of the basics, the copper tubing, you know. So I said, well, the house looks sound. So we thought about, the next day I took off from work, and I drove around the neighborhood. I really didn't know anything about the neighborhood. So I drove past the house and around the block, and it was nice. It was a block, only ran one block long. So I forget what they were offering. We made a counter offer, and they accepted it. And that was another thrilling part of life. Oh, what did we do? What did we do? So, of course, then we talked to Dad and Pop about this, and of course, he was aghast. Oh, you paid what for that house? I paid almost as much for that as they did for that single. They had already moved to Manoa area before we moved over to there. They had moved out of West Philadelphia. But things had changed, and mortgage rates had changed, so it was like a economic shock to him. It was, oh, what a price we paid, Bob. Anyway, it was $15,000 is what we paid for the house.
Is 15 or 12.5? I get both those numbers.
15.
Oh, was it 15?
15. Because we sold it for 3 times what we bought it for. 15.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, we eventually moved in, and I remember, the bank. Oh, yes, the bank. That's right too. First dealings with a bank. Now we had old accounts with PSFS that came from public school, where everybody saved their nickels and their dimes and everything. So we kept that account when we started to work, and that was one account we had. But that was a savings fund. That was not a bank, a full-service bank. So we joined First Pennsylvania because we needed a checking account. So we were going to have to write checks. So we had accounts in both banks. We closed out the PSFS account. That was just too limited, no services there. Anyway, we applied for the mortgage, and that's, you've been down that road. That's a lot of fun. And we applied under FHA. Inspector comes out, so he writes us a letter, he called us, that's right. He said, yes, we could probably, front the mortgage, not a problem. He says, but we want to guarantee that in a year, the house will be brought up to standards, because it's obviously, he said it's mostly decorative. He said, but still, it's if anything happens, we can't get the money out of that house right now. It's very marginal. So I thought, that's a fool's errand, that is. I said, no, I can't do that. I said, I want the house, but I can't guarantee. I have no idea what's going to happen because I fall tomorrow and break a leg. I'm out of work for 6 months or whatever. I can't possibly guarantee you anything like that. So we parted the conversation. I called him back a couple of days later and said, okay, you got the mortgage. So I learned how to deal with banks. I mean, he was a nice enough guy, but the request was ridiculous. So we moved in and spent the next 12 and a half years there, pretty much, fixing the place up and, getting it. Indeed, we did put it in shape and made foolish things. Like one of the first things we did was after we cleaned the place all out and stripped it out, we wallpapered it. And that was the worst thing in the world we ever did. I can't remember who crayoned on it first, but it was a disaster. Paper didn't last a year.
I'm going to say Dave, just because he's not here.
Yes. Somebody did. I don't think we ever got the true story out of that either.
I don't remember.
So we stripped all that out and finished it up. But it was nice. The house was solid and painted it all. In fact, it was so solid it was hard to work in. It was very hard. It was all masonry house. Yeah. But then the second year we were there, the furnace went. But other than that, it was just normal wear and tear for the house. It served us well.
So you have a mortgage. You have one
Yes.
kid. Mom was saying last night, paycheck to paycheck for a while. But she says she wasn't worried. She didn't know enough to be worried. However, maybe she was focused on days,
Yeah.
and the next one, like, were you worried? Or were you, you know,
I don't know about worried, but certainly there were concerns. Not really, I guess, because if I'd have been worried, I guess I'd have been worried about my job. And somehow I wasn't worried about that job. I felt very confident in what I was doing and my abilities to do it. And it looked like a very steady job. It wasn't, had I been in some of the other places I was working, that would have been a different story. There's a great deal of relaxation you can take in stability in your job. And that reflects back on when you get home at night, and you can leave your work at work and home is home. And that was a good thing to learn in early separation. Well, I guess I've told you guys enough times, there's not much real about work. Work is one of these funny places you go, do things sometimes beyond your control and beyond common sense, but you do it anyway because they're paying you. And if they pay you enough, you'll overlook anything. So you move ahead with that. No, that was a good steady job. So yeah, it was tight. I mean, sure. I mean, a lot of times it was, Now, fortunately, it was only, I don't know, maybe 5 miles from door to door. And many a payday I went to work with nothing more than change in my pocket. So yeah, the tight's the word.
so it's tight, and you decide, okay, it's time for a second.
Well, but time moves on. You know what I mean? I didn't see me getting rich in a hurry, and we certainly wanted at least 2 children. So there again, you got to sit down and kind of make that decision. We're going to move ahead. And of course, Mom said, well, that means obviously I won't be going back to work for a while. Now's the hour. I'm young, and we're young enough to do it. And I said, I can't see doing this 10 years from now. Which is why I always scratch my head when people say they can't afford this or that. I say, what you can't afford is time. Older is not better when it comes to that sort of thing. So anyway, yes, that was the plan. So that then there was the day on October the 19th that came along, and we had a second baby. That didn't go as smoothly. I guess Mom probably relayed that story.
We're not up that far yet.
Oh, okay. There again, it was one of those, we were sitting there. Mom said, well, we're not going to deliver, so you guys, in fact, I don't know if Grandma was with me that night or not. Can't remember. Anyway, he says, no point in hanging around, but we'll keep her, he said, because if it doesn't go into labor by morning, we'll induce. Go home again, and got a call that morning. I can't remember the sequence of events at that point. That you had been delivered, but you were in major distress. You were extremely cyanotic. So they said that I had to come and transfer you to Children's Hospital. I thought, geez, don't you cross the bridge? What's the big deal? Why can't you take? I don't know what that was all about. I never asked. They said that's what got to be. I grabbed her grandmother. I know she was with me on that run, and we can show up at the hospital. We whizzed you off to Children's Hospital. The old Children's Hospital I'm talking about, the one that was on the east side of the river, the old building. And it was like every old foreign movie you ever saw about hospitals. It was old, it was in bad shape. The hallways were just crowded with cribs, not occupied, but there was no space to put things inside. It had a great reputation. It was a good hospital, but depressing. I mean, depressing. So we show up there anyway and deliver the baby, and we sort of hang around for a little while. Then they take you to those babies east and babies west. One was in for more observation. The other was critical care. I think you were in the observation part, as I can remember. But they didn't know what the problem was. They didn't know whether you had reacted to the anesthetic or exactly what it was. That's why you never had an aspirin as a baby, anything. You had problems. We never gave you anything that was out there because they had no idea about there was some kind of reaction. They originally thought there was some kind of an inversion in your heart valves. So that was why you were there for observation mostly, because they didn't know exactly where to start at this point. There was no surgery or anything done. So that was a kind of a long day getting you all established. So meanwhile, of course, Mom was still over at Penn, which is where you were delivered. That's, both of you guys were delivered in Penn, University of Pennsylvania. So she wanted to go home, obviously, sitting around in a maternity ward where there's all kinds of babies coming and going, and you're there. That's depressing as hell. So she came home. The next day, I can't remember if I went in by myself. I think maybe Mom was with me. Anyway, I get this very pleasant Oriental man who, at that point, obviously he was in charge of the floor at that point, and he starts to explain to me what they had discovered at this point, and what they thought they were going to do, and tests they were going to perform. Well, he spoke very broken English, so I must have had this guy repeat 3-4 times everything he said, and he just stood there and repeated and repeated, until I had some. First, I'm not a medical person, so I stop him every once in a while. I don't know what's that word mean, and if you do that, what does that entail? And very patient. Anyway, what it became, of course, was a waiting game. We kind of waited it out. We were down there just about every day, and then we met. I'm sorry, I can't remember the doctor's name anymore, who was the head of pediatrics there. He called us into his office along about the 3rd or 4th day down. He said, he says, we can find nothing wrong. There's no problem with the heart valves. There's no anything. Whether it was a passing thing with the anesthetic or somewhere, I don't know. He said, I'll tell you this much, everything's fine. Your color came back, you pinked up. He said, we're going to hold him for one more day, but if I don't have any problems, tomorrow morning, take him home. And that was the end of that. You came home, and there was no more story to that. But I never forgot that hospital. They were a great group of people. Like I said, of course, the other side of the room is you kind of walked in a little bit of a corridor there. When I say there were 2 glassed-in areas there, the other side was just, it was heartbreaking. It was depressing to walk in there. Probably the most depressing 3 or 4 days of my life. But hey, ended up great. So you walked out with a smile on your face. Whew, you put it all behind you. But I never forgot the hospital and the job they did. They were just tremendous people.
So at one point, that 3 or 4 days, you just weren't sure what was going to happen.
They weren't sure, we weren't sure, except that the prognosis each day was a little better. You know what I mean? In other words, you were still there, you were still hanging on. All your signs seemed okay, which I'm sure kind of confounded them, because now they're trying to figure what the hell exactly went wrong over there.
But what was wrong? Like what was?
I believe, if your mom may have a better memory of this than I do, but I do believe it was a drug reaction, whether it was the anesthetic that they used or whatever was used during the birth. I'm not sure.
Like what was wrong? Like, it's not in the sense of what was the cause of it, but was I not breathing? Was I blue?
Yes, you were blue. Yeah, I said you were cyanotic. Not just, normally it just means around the lips, but you had a very bad color. You were not pink. That's how bad it was. That's why it was an immediate move from hospital to hospital. There was no delaying. I don't know what they tried some things there at Penn at the beginning, but they simply didn't feel they were equipped for pediatric work there, which always struck me as odd. Anyway, that I didn't question, I didn't care. If you got a better place to go, we're going, and away we went. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of explanation at the point. And you know something, once a storm like that blows over, you don't really care as long as it's on somebody else's ground. Yeah, you just moved on. But because I know that was one of the things that the doctor, well, of course the doctor got all the information from the hospitals, or pediatrician. And that was his recommendation too. No aspirins, nothing like that. Fortunately, you're a pretty healthy kid, so it didn't.
I remember not taking aspirin. I remember taking Tylenol.
Yeah.
And
only eventually.
I was allergic to aspirin, but I don't think I probably wasn't ever allergic to aspirin.
I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Or it may have been something that passed too. I mean, at that point, who knows? You're some immunity thing that went out of whack, or everything is so delicate. Who knows? It's not something I could certainly explain. But they're very patient with us. I mean, there was a sit down. There was no rushing you anywhere if you want to come. And hospital was good in a sense too, because parents were allowed to stay. If you wanted to sit there overnight and stay, they give you a chair. They in fact, they encouraged it, particularly in the intensive areas. They really thought that was, because obviously nobody has enough nursing staff to attend all the children there, certainly. And I was glad to see them eventually. They closed that old hospital down and moved, of course, right next to Penn. It's a beautiful hospital over there. But
so where'd you come up with Keith, Andrew?
It wasn't. It was Andrew. Keith. You were named Andrew.
Don't scratch.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Noisy. I forgot it's like a one-piece band over here.
People talk like this sometimes, like, and then
No, we won't do that.
So Keith, Andrew, Keith. What was the story there?
I don't know. Just names. How you sit down, you pick out names you like, and we came up with those two names. You know what I mean? David was never a problem. The day we were married, Mom said, "We have a boy. It's David." So that was 2 years before he was even conceived. So that was not a problem. He picked up my name for his middle name. Yeah, Mom already had the announcements all written. You were Andrew Keith. And suddenly we looked at that and said, well, what do you think of Andy? And I don't think a whole lot of Andy. Like Andrew. Well, then let's not. So she crossed off. And wrote down Keith Andrew. Okay, sounds good to me. So, yes, you kind of came in one way and went out the other. So it's it was just name selection. That's all. Names we liked. We got down to two names we liked and decided which way it was going to go. And I didn't want any juniors. That was something I didn't want. And neither did Mom. She didn't think much of the idea either. Because on my father's side, while I say I didn't know much of that side of the family, I know he had, I guess he was probably a brother named Daniel, who had a son named Daniel. And it was Big Dan and Little Dan. That's how I remember them being referred to. I think maybe met them twice in my entire life. And Little Dan was, of course, much bigger than Big Dan, but Big Dan was older than, I said, this is ridiculous. Yeah. So, although in my course of going through life, I didn't meet very many Daniels. So it would have been,
How did you get the name Daniel? Do you know?
Danny Boy. The song.
Really?
Hmm. Yeah, Grandmom liked the song. That was her thing. I don't know. Maybe there was an Irish influence there. I never thought. It could be. I don't know. Yeah. She really liked the song.
I did not know that.
Although that was not the song she sang to me when I was cranky at night. Deep Purple was my song.
Don't know that one.
Oh, that's an old timer. Yeah.
I won't make you sing it.
No, you wouldn't do that. I enjoy listening. I enjoy listening. I don't sing.
I'll find it.
Yeah. So you can find it. It's a very soft ballad. So that was it. That was where I got that. Now, I'm not quite sure where the Anthony came from. I don't know that one. That could have been the English side.
If I were a girl, I always heard growing up, I would have been Karen Jane.
Karen was my name, my choice. It's the German form of Mom's name.
Oh, is that really what?
Hmm. No, that's just that's
coincidence.
coincidental to the fact that I like that name.
Okay.
I always liked the name Karen.
And Jane would have been after
My grandmother / sister, who was named after her. Grandmother.
Okay, so now you have two kids. It's the
No money, man.
no money. You're working full time. You're working at school at night. On top of it, you're working at silos here and there. I can't quite.
Yeah, right by the time you were born, I was doing a second job. You're right. Yeah.
So the late '60s, kind of you have a different experience of the late '60s than people think about the late '60s. So.
I was I was not a flower power person. I wasn't into drugs. I didn't do pot or marijuana or whatever at the time. No, I didn't even get too much involved in the whole war protest thing. Whether I agreed or disagreed, I just did not have time. I didn't have time to study the issue. Okay, all I knew is they weren't drafting me, and I felt bad for the people over there. Well, anyway, it's the whole political thing about war, but no, that was definitely a busy time of life. It was one of those times, and of course, Mom's got home with two children at this point, so life is hectic. It was a big deal when we used to go out and get a pizza Friday nights or something. That was high living, that was. But it made it fun. What makes it fun, of course, is doing it together. There was never any. We used to kid each other. She said, I always married you for your money. I said, I thought I married you for your money. Well, there you go, mutual disappointment or something. Yeah, no, it was. It was a lot of fun going through it, and the nice part about it, of course, being in that first house on Brodnick Lane, was the neighborhood itself. It was a very supportive neighborhood. We had people there that were in the same boat. Of course, the Saunders moved in not too long after that, and then same deal. They had 2 children. He was going for his doctorate at Bryn Mawr, and Ronnie was working. But it's like the same deal we were in. The Wattses across the street, of course, they had 3, and the Kramers down the street, another 2 boys there. But it was all the same. The Sibleys were next to us for quite a while there. They had a big family, so it was tough. Everybody's in the same boat. It was, they pinched the nickel until the buffalo screamed. It was just that's how you had to make it. So the Sibleys were cool. They were good neighbors. They were good neighbors. He was the one that taught you or David to chew gum. Phil Sibley.
That's from David.
Yeah, it was probably David. Yeah.
It was a great neighborhood to grow up in as a kid. Certainly in that alley, and friends were there. School was great and close. I mean, I remember that neighborhood. I mean, you couldn't have picked a better spot for us to grow up in.
No, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and the silo job didn't last all that long. I was there maybe over a couple of Christmases, and they weren't doing all that well. I mean, the chain was doing well. That store wasn't particularly doing all that great. It wasn't enough to support. I think there were a couple of us part-timers there and a full-size sales staff there. They didn't do bad. The owner of the company is a very nice guy. Lived right on Over Brook Parkway.
And this was right after I was born, basically to get extra cash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was working that. Mostly weekends. A couple of evenings, then weekends.
Have you graduated from Temple yet, or gotten a degree?
Yeah, somewhere right in here. Let me see, where am I? I'm working at Trent. No, not at that point. No. I was still going because when I left there, I was there a while, 6 years maybe. I can't now, I'm getting fuzzy, something like that. I won't quote that as an exact number. That's when I moved up and worked just off of Frankfurt Avenue, near the Frankfurt Market Street L, up near Norris Street, front of Norris. Worked for a company there.
Keep talking.
Okay, but the...
Just want to make sure it's running.
Okay, check me out here.
You're going,
Okay.
Doing my paranoid thing.
Because I remember walking from there up to Temple, because Norris Street, which is where half a block off where I was working, if you walk due west, you went right on Temple's campus. So I remember I was still going at that point. I finished up. I think I finished up somewhere in that phase, right around there. I was just about finished with that. And of course, they didn't have at that time. There was no Philadelphia community colleges. They didn't exist under the educational system at that time. Temple had its own type of community college for people like myself who are looking for associate degrees. Where you finished all your study work first, all your coursework, your mechanics, your stress analysis, your metallurgical study, or whatever you were doing at that point. And then you went on up to the campus up near Cheltenham Avenue. still on the Philadelphia side, right near the stadium, where the stadium is up there, and finished up your other courses there, your histories and your English, your writing, and your psychology, and whatever other stuff it was required of you to do. That went by fairly quickly, because while the other courses require an awful lot of time and study, because of the nature of them, this did not. And so
what are you studying there? Drafting?
Yeah, that was my primary one. Machine design. Actually, it was strange. When I first signed up for the courses, drafting as such, I think was a three credit course, because they considered that a major part of the mechanical design. By the time I got actually into some drafting work, it had dropped down to a 2-credit course. Before I left the tech school, it was down to 1. That's how, because it was, they figured that's something you could learn probably in a semester, which you need to do. Everything from there on in is perfecting your skill. Not that you didn't have to do it, but you weren't getting a lot of credit for it, because they introduced a lot more other academic type stuff, or your stress analysis and your mechanics, that kind of textbook thing.
So what are you doing at Trent at this point? What's your job there? What do you
I was doing drafting work there. Now, that was an industrial furnace manufacturer. Mostly electrical furnaces. Some gas work, not much gas furnaces, for any number of processes. That was the interesting part about that job. It wasn't so much the furnaces you were building. They were reasonably, there was a lot of standardization to them. But the processes that you were doing, or that they were going to be used for, was extremely interesting. We supplied a lot of stuff to Anchor Hocking Glass Works down South Jersey, when they used to be big down there. Ever notice some of the old glasses around here with the initials on them, with the M's on them?
Yeah, I have them at home.
Yeah, that was a kind of a gift from them to us. We had supplied them several units down there for what they call glass annealing or glass leering. It's stress relieving glass after it's formed and stamped out. It's very stressful, so you just ping it with your fingernail, it might shatter. So it all has to be stress relieved. So it takes the standard, bumping and banging in dishwashers and what have you. So they were very nice. They set a catalog up on Christmas, and actually what they said was, it's absolute manufacturing cost. Anybody wants to buy anything, which is why both George and I loaded up. I think he's still got to load up his stuff there too.
I use that glass for my maker's mark.
Yeah. So that was an interesting job. A lot of process work there. We got into. There was an awful lot of manufacturing locally. We supplied a lot of stuff to TV manufacturers when they were still here in the United States. An awful lot of Philco that used to be right up in Northeast Philadelphia, or along Hunting Park Avenue, actually. Sylvania of New York, and we supplied these big, long conveyor ovens, because the glass tubes had to also be stress relieved. Otherwise, they were prone to shattering. So we supplied a lot of TV stuff. For a small company, I mean, it was small. We had, it was Mike and George and myself. I think we were about the 3 main draftsman designers there, and there was another fellow that had a separate type of job that he did, mostly repeat work for the company. But it wasn't very big.
You say you're designing. Well, what is that? What are you doing?
But that means taking basic information now. In other words, if you have a process and somebody wants to do something to a product, whether it's stress relieve it or dry it or cure it or whatever. There's an interesting story about Musselman's applesauce. And you had to work out the process. If it was drying something, you had to figure, what was the condition when it got into your furnace, how much liquid did you need to evaporate, what kind of heat did you need to evaporate that much, how much did you need, and then size your electrical units and the size of the oven itself and ventilation for it. And it was interesting because you also got into doing some control work, electrical control work, on-off switches and fail-safe switches and doors, all that kind of nonsense. It was a lot for a small company, I mean, it was literally built into the hills of Manayunk. I mean, if you came off there was a small street in front of it. If you came off that street, you were in the basement level. If you walked up to the next door and went in there, you were on the first floor level. And then if you went to the parking lot in the back where I parked my car, you came in at the second floor level. And we worked on the third, so you had to go up one flight of steps to the third floor. You're the only thing above ground at that end of the building. So it was an interesting place to work, interesting people.
So when did you leave and why, and where did you go?
Oh, money was the problem there. It was a fascinating job, and I love working with the people. That was the essential reason. There was one or two other reasons too that I found annoying, I guess. You know, sometimes when you get a feeling like I got to move on, and then there's a buzz in your ear or something you don't know why, it just adds to the annoyance. It's like a bee flying around your head. You know what I mean? So, and again, we're back to the whole story of needing cash. We have, you boys were growing up, and the house, of course, maintaining it and doing all that, and then having that great desire to go out to dinner once in a while. Just something, nothing earth-shattering. So from there, that's when I moved up to working up in Frankfurt, just off Frankfurt Avenue for the elevator. And they were a furniture manufacturer. Now I say furniture, I mean store fixtures. You see those racks that they have there, all kinds of racks and showcases and things like that. Did all that for several major store outlets, particularly more in the upstate area through Allentown, Scranton, all those areas. There were chains, not as big, say, as stores like Wanamaker's, but all that kind of stuff. And that was interesting. That was so fascinating. Now that's where it was interesting in a sense, but it wasn't technically involved. The people who did the shop work, the people who cut the parts and formed the parts, and the welders who put them together, didn't know how to read blueprints. So I'm thinking to myself, gee, that's interesting. Here I am studying this, and these guys can't even read the thing. But you learn rapidly how to work with people. Everything we did there had to be done in 3D sketches. They had to be able to see, what this shape looked like, and where, just as if you were to pick up an instruction manual out of a box. And that's how it had to be presented to these people. Now that's the type of work you did. So you would make a little sketch of a particular part and give it to a guy and tell him where to drill what size holes, and etc. That's the way it went. The other job at Trent was something like that too. We had these, you had an overall picture of what the unit would look like, but each component inside of that had to be separately detailed in minute detail. How long something had to be, where it was to be bent, how much it was to be bent, how much of a radius to bend it on so that you didn't damage the material. It was interesting from different points of view, but I figured this is really getting out. That was a cool. That was another lesson to learn. They obviously started paying me more than I was making at Trent. In fact, I found that I was making almost as much as my immediate supervisor. I thought, well, I felt much better about leaving. I said, that was silly. There's no place to go. The ceiling was already hitting me in the head. The next job was somewhat interesting. But let me go back to the store fixture a minute. I didn't finish that story. It was a place where they could pay you so much you couldn't afford to leave. They were willing to pay. I wasn't there all that length of time. I'd already had 2 raises since I was there. They really wanted me to stay. And two brothers owned the place, and I explained to the guys, I understand your position. I said, but at this point I'm finishing up my schooling. I said, I really want to move into what I'm studying. And I said, this simply isn't going to hold my interest. And I said, no point in you paying me any kind of money. So when I left there, it was almost a parallel move. It wasn't much of an increase in pay, and I knew that. But but that's the trap you can fall into. You know what I mean? If you're strictly interested in the money, But there was nothing to learn there. There was nobody to learn from. There were two designers. One of them was the owner of the company, and the other was this fellow Jerry, who was very good. Did a lot of artistic rendering, because you had to sell the customer. You had to give him an idea of what it was going to be made. So there wasn't. I didn't see a future there.
And what period are you there? What is it, like 1 year, like 1970 or something?
A little more than a year. Yeah, somewhere probably not far from there. 'Cause I didn't stay in the other job all that. No, that was the other one. That's right. No. Well, in all seriousness now, in my day, you couldn't put down a dozen jobs on your resume. That was considered, that you were either flighty or, unable to maintain a job. It was not looked on favorably. Today they say, "Oh, boy, you got all this experience." Two worlds. So I used to push jobs together. Pardon me. If, like I said, some jobs folded up in less than a year, they disappeared off my resume. I take this job and push them together, and nobody ever checked. It wasn't all that important to them. If it was, anyway. I wasn't there all that long, and again, mostly for lack of. I wanted to stay there till I pretty much finished school. I think that's where I finished up working there. Because again, the commute was easy for me. And from there, I moved over to, where did I move? Not far up the road. Little combination called Edmonds and Shellmeyer, which is just north of Torresdale Avenue, over on the far east side, right near, not far off 95, although you can't get to 95 from there because the railroad's there. It was a fairly large company in that it was owned by a New York corporation. Probably except for Vertol, the biggest company I ever worked for, size-wise. And that was the other thing I learned. Big companies are a drag. You're lost there. You're just, if you want to get lost and sit in the corner somewhere and get paid for the next 20 years, that didn't appeal to me. So I went to work for them for a very short time, maybe a year. And I remember, I'm sure Mom will tell you the story, same story. The first Christmas I was there, they were having a Christmas party up a few blocks up there on the main street. And so I asked Mom, I said, "Hey, you want to go to a Christmas party this year?" I said, "What the heck? It's a free night out. They're paying us, food and whatever." I said, "Because you may as well come now." I said, because there's very little chance I'm going to be here next Christmas. I said, "You don't have to know these people's names because it's just not important." So I guess it was not too many months. I worked with one very interesting guy there, an older guy, who was a tool and die designer. And he was interesting, but he was so wrapped up in his little corner that, I was kind of a spin-off of him, things he needed done. Other than that, there were two industrial engineers there. And they were actually the senior man there left too. He took off for another job, and I worked with a young fellow named Mike McMahon. I always remember this guy because the day Rita called Mom, says, "Hey, what's Dan doing these days?" "Oh," she said, "nothing good." She said, "He's looking for a job." "Oh," she said, "I got a great interview for him." So Mom called me, and I said, "Sure, I'll buzz up there at lunchtime. It's not far from here. It's just right at 95. So I had my jacket with me. It was springtime, so I had my sport coat with me. But I didn't have a tie. I thought, well, it doesn't look good to me without a tie. In fact, Rita called me and talked to me on the phone. I said, it's a conservative outfit, she said. But she was working for an employment agency at the time. And very conservative outfit, she said, but I think you'll like it. They're well established, they're a good firm, and they pay well. Here I come. So I walk over to Mike and say, "Hey, Mike, mind if I borrow your tie?" And he looked at me. Of course, right well knowing where I was going, he said, "Where's the interview?" I said, "Well, it's just up the road a piece. I'll be back in an hour." Anyway, I went up and had an interview with the chief engineer at the time. Very nice guy. And another one of the very knowledgeable people. When you meet knowledgeable people, you know I can come here and I can learn. This guy has just got a world of information. So we had that meeting, and I went back to work, and then a few days later we made it a day interview. You know, where you go and you fill out papers and talk to the human resources people and all that kind of jazz, and spent the day up there. And they hired me, so I left there. But I knew I was going to do that. That was kind of a dead-end job. I think what killed me there was they moved me from day work to second shift. They needed somebody in quality control, somebody to check the parts as they come off the machine. I said, not really my thing. I said, but you can read. Oh yeah, I can read gauges, but I want to. I didn't tell them that. So that was a drag. I don't think I saw you guys for 3 months, because I was eating dinner like 2 in the afternoon because I had to be there by 3, and you start at 4 and you're off at midnight or whatever the heck kind of a schedule it was. I don't know. So I said, no, this is not me. They don't pay me enough for this. And that's when I took the other job, and that's where I've been. I've been associated with them for about 37 years.
What's this company now?
Kingsbury.
And how did you find Kingsbury?
Through Rita.
Oh, that was the conservative.
That's the conservative company,
Put
right?
that together. You always complained about wearing ties. I should have put that together.
Yeah. So they were a good interview. They were nice people. I remember the gentleman who was running the company at the time was CEO. This guy named Sam Calderon. I was sitting in the little conference room there, and I was talking. I guess Russell was there. He was the chief engineer, vice president of engineering. And Bill Mahoney, he was human resources. And Sam came walking in and introduced himself, very old school. And he saw where I was living, and he lived right in East Falls. Oh, she said, well, you're not all that far from me. He said, and that's the big question. He said, well, what happens in bad weather? I said, well, if it's really bad weather, so I won't be here. Okay, he said, and he left. There was never any input from him to the guys interviewing me. That was, my feeling was that, you're paying me for what's between my ears, not my back. I was shoveling, digging ditches for you or something. Anyway. So they hired me, and I found out later on that the assistant chief engineer then, who became vice president, Bill Chambers, who became a very good friend of mine. In fact, he was the fellow we visited down in Naples. He was the guy that went out when I did. Took myself and 3 other people out of the engineering department with him as a retired group. That whole group moved out when he did. That's kind of a way they do things, when somebody, department head like that goes out, he can kind of take a tide of people with him.
His administration?
Yes. His loyal group. I guess I don't know whether we're sure we're going to be loyal to anybody else or not. I don't know what the feeling is. Right? But actually, I think what the real thing was there, that the pension fund was flush, and so they were able to offer a nice package to leave. And I said yes. Why wouldn't I be a fool and not take a package?
So what is Kingsbury, and what did you do there?
That was a true design job. There you really had to sit down, sometimes with the salesperson. They were sales engineers too. A lot of the salespeople were engineers. The fellow that headed the sales department was a marine engineer. The man who ran the company right after Sam passed away was an engineer, mechanical engineer. So you were working with an administration that was, on the same page you were. You and the administration were working together. There weren't any bean counters, shall I say, in between you. In fact, they kind of took a second step. That was the power of the B in the company at the time. They were nice, like I said, and of course what you got was simply a folder of information. This is what the guy sold. This is what the customer wants, and now it's up to you to put, this writing into a physical design that'll function the way he wants it to. And then, of course, then those drawings all go to the customer for approval. Yeah, that was a lot more interesting, because now you're starting from the written word to the drawing word. And once that was done, of course, then you made your component drawings, and that went to production. You told them what had to be done in order to make this finished product. So it was interesting because you worked across the board. You worked with everybody in the building. It was sales, marketing, obviously the people in your own department, the production people who actually planned and what machine was going to do what operation and that sort of thing. And then you worked with quality control people who eventually inspected the components and see that they were done. So it was nice. You got to know a lot of people. And I worked well with people. It wasn't a problem for me.
And what were you building? What were you making design? It was for I know GE was a client, the Navy's a client. I think.
Yeah, they built fluid film bearings. Now they were bearings, is what they were. They were not rollers. Pardon me. Jeez, right. Fluid film bearing is obviously a bearing is anything that supports rotational motion. One thing rotating upon another, which you can see in any caster on a table, or which is extremely small scale. The difference is that there is no contact between the stationary and the moving part. What's between the two is what by fluid film is there's a film of oil between the two. So theoretically, there's no wear to either part. We received an engineering design award several years ago for a dam that they built that was still in service. They put in service in 1912. The very first year we were in business. The company actually started out in Pittsburgh as a division of Westinghouse. The man who designed this, that's his patent, never wanted to go in business. That was not his thing. He was a designer. He came up with this great idea. He introduced it to Westinghouse because they were making turbines at the time and generators, and they said, this is what you need to hold these massive weight things. And they did it for a while there, apparently, because some of the real old drawings still have Pittsburgh on them. But then Westinghouse said, we're not in the bearing business. We don't want to do this. So he was forced to open his own company. And we're about to celebrate our 100th anniversary here in about 2 years, less. So.
Growing up, I trying to explain, what's your dad do? He's a draftsman. Oh, okay, which is fine for most people. Then so what does that mean?
Yeah.
Designs bearings. Okay, what is that?
Yeah.
Could never explain it.
No, it's not an easy process, which is why I used to keep some booklets here around the house, because you're right, it was difficult to explain. Yeah. Particularly the massive size of things we're talking about. We're talking about all of the generating equipment that is now located and has been for years in Hoover Dam. All the power that's generated there, all those generators sitting on Kingsbury bearings.
How big is a bearing? Like feet? Like
the biggest thing I ever worked on was 108 inches in diameter. 108 inches. Okay. Yeah. So it was. You could get anything from extremely small. We built very small bearings, high-speed bearings for Carrier air conditioner. And they're not these little window units, they're big commercial units. They're big commercial. You got to understand something, the size of the bearing relative to the size of what is supporting is horrendous. There's an outfit called Air Preheater, which has a really interesting thing. What they do is they recirculate furnace air, where steel processing, where they get these tremendous heats, they're melting metals, steel. What they do is they take that hot air as it comes off of the melt, and they pick it up and they recirculate it back so that incoming air isn't ambient air, it's elevated air. These things are, I can't imagine how big they really. I gave all of my booklets to my boss when I left, because I got to know the guys there, and they sent me all kinds of brochures on this stuff. They were tremendous in size. They may have been 25, 30 foot in diameter. And our little bearing, which was about 5 foot in diameter, sat under there like a peanut. So it was a product that people had to depend on. Propulsion for ships. I think we probably outfitted about every naval ship during World War II.
Yep, tape's about to run out.
There you go.
The blinking, flashing thing.